Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shelby This Week.
Well, we wish we could start this edition of Shelby This Week that way, but that man, the one who started this program, passed away last week. My name is Nick Monticelli. I worked here at Shelby TV many years ago. I was one of Nye's first reporters, and he is the reason I have a career in journalism now. Because he has had such an impact at this station, on the people here, and such an impact on the journalism profession, we'll spend this entire show telling you all about him. Phil Nye was 87 years old and was surrounded by his family when he died. He was born in Newark, Ohio on March 1st, 1927, and after many attempts joined the Army. He was set to deploy to Europe during World War II, but got the mumps. His bags were sent to war. He wasn't. Eventually, he became a part of the USO troop in North Carolina, where he found a love for theater. And after getting out of the Army, he went to Ohio State, studying theater and journalism. That is the easy part of this story to tell. Arthur Schenck reports on the impact Nye had on radio and television news, especially right here in Detroit.
Philip Nye's stellar career spanned over 7 decades. From his first gig as staff announcer at WSAZ in West Virginia to his time right here in Shelby TV, Phil always believed that news journalists had a duty to honestly inform the public. With his many huge accomplishments, such as becoming a vice president at ABC News in New York, or being asked to help create the Burnham Broadcasting Group, whose many stations across the country were eventually bought by the Fox network, it was his time here in Michigan that made this Buckeye the ringleader for 2 of Detroit's biggest news entities. In 1963, Phil moved from WNXT in Portsmouth, Ohio, to a little 5,000-watt radio station in Dearborn, Michigan. As WKNR's new news director, Phil created Contact News, which would invoke an energetic and upbeat news delivery that stuck to the facts.
Airport with a high in the middle 80s and chance of occasional thunder showers this afternoon and evening. Here's Philip Nye.
Spectacular downtown Detroit fire destroys a waterfront landmark.
WKNR Contact News.
For WKNR, Keener 13, this is Philip Nye reporting. A spectacular fire last night and early today sent flames 100 feet in the air and sent half of the Detroit Fire Department's workforce to the scene. Destroyed by the blaze, the abandoned Michigan Central Freight Depot at West Jefferson and 3rd.
A small 5,000-watt radio station in Dearborn, Michigan, and ended up being #1 and a huge #1 in the Detroit market in the mid-'60s. A lot of that goes back to a lot of things that were happening at that time. One thing that was happening was the Beatles, and Keener fortunately came along at the same time. The Beatles came along, and we kind of rose together, if we could put it that way. In fact, we brought the Beatles here a couple of times.
And while at Keener, Phil didn't always leave the dirty work for his award-winning news team, as he's heard here on WKNR's broadcast of the 1967 Detroit riots.
Full of snipers tonight. The vehicle sounds in the background are the tanks, armored personnel carriers. That would sound more like a sniper shot, the ones we've just heard. They're firing very bullets.
I left the station and went into that area. That was Sunday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. I got home the following Friday evening when it was finally settling down and all over. It was quite an experience. Looking back, I guess I thought I was bulletproof at that time to spend the time and do the things that we did at that time. But we had some great coverage.
Soon Phil would move out to Los Angeles to manage a newspaper and work as a reporter at WKLA.
That truck loaded heads for Fidelity's warehouse, wherever that may be. In this particular home, we have no idea who lived here, but the house has now been totally stripped of cabinets, of the sink, of all appliances, and even in this case, the rooftop air conditioner. Phil Nye, Channel 5 News reporting.
But in June of 1972, he would return to Detroit and help create another Motor City legend. Starting out as a reporter and anchor, he was promoted to news director.
Number one, we expanded the news. We were doing a half hour in the beginning. We expanded 6 to 7, started the hour. Later, of course, made the great We Got Who You Wanted by hiring Marilyn Turner, John Kelly, and Jack LeGoff from Channel 2, which basically was the end of Channel 2 in those days. We already had Bill Bonds. Later, I brought in some other people. I could go a long list of people, reporters, anchor people that we hired. Diana Lewis being one, of course, that we brought in with Bill, and it worked. And by, I guess, 1977, we were a runaway number one in the market. In fact, we had some of the highest ratings of any television station in the United States at that time.
In creating the award-winning action news team, Phil mastered the art of dealing with the egos of some of Detroit's best news people.
Bill Bonds, I still think, was one of the best of all the anchormen I worked with, and I worked with him from coast to coast and basically border to border through the years. Bonds had a fantastic, you can't be in the business without having a big ego. But Bill's was probably the biggest, and unfortunately, along with the ego, there were some demons that lived within that great body that we also had to fight. I often said that I'd like to hang a psychiatry sign outside my office door because I felt more like a psychiatrist sometimes than I did a news director. But it came with the territory, and you did what you had to do.
People respect him because he knew what he was doing. I think the other thing is, there was dead bang honesty with that guy. You didn't have to worry about any kind of hidden agenda. With Phil, I mean, he was who he was, and it just came right through, across the desk at people, and people respected that. What you saw with Phil is what you got, and I think people in the news business like that. People in the business in general they have no respect for people with hidden agendas, charades, that sort of thing. Phil was never any of that.
In 1979, Phil left Channel 7 and was called to duty in New York as a vice president of ABC News. But his legacy and work ethic continued on in the journalist he helped teach.
There is no question Nye was a pioneer in journalism, one of the greats. So how exactly did he end up here at Shelby TV? It's a great story to tell, and you'll hear it after the break.
You promised me the world. Is this what you had in mind?
Every choice we make has a consequence. Help EarthShare and its members restore balance to the world. Visit earthshare.org and see what you can do. EarthShare, one environment, one simple way to care for it.
That's low. Look, he's blushing.
To have worked alongside Phil Nye was an honor and a privilege. He taught us to never forget that every story has an impact, good or bad, on someone. He also reminded us the power that journalists have to stand up for what's right and to better the communities we live and work in. I'm joined now by the full-time staff of Shelby TV, Stacy Santaterra, John Martin. We were we were honored and privileged to have Phil join our staff. How he got here is kind of a funny story though, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
How did it happen?
Well, we were looking for a full-time news director, and we had an ad in the paper. We got a bunch of resumes, and I looked at Phil's resume. It was printed on vellum, and I was concerned. I was concerned because he lived far away, and I could tell that he was an older gentleman. And everybody doesn't let me forget that I did not want to hire Phil. Stacy said I wanted to hire a blonde girl.
Him. He did. It's true. He did. But it's important to note that the ad Phil responded to was, we put out an ad that we were trying to create a news program in Shelby Township that had never been done before. So that's what caught his attention when he saw the ad in the paper.
Well, and I think that segues into the impact that Phil had not only on us, but on Shelby Township as a whole, I mean, this was brand new, something the residents have never seen before. How did the community respond to the show?
I think they respond positively. We had problems with the some elected officials. They were not used to having a legitimate news program on a government channel. Mm-hmm. To some, that was something that you just could not do. How can you report objectively on what the board does? You know, they thought it wasn't proper if we criticized.
Phil made that a really easy transition for us, or made that easy for us to do, because he just had an eloquent way of doing it. Yeah. I mean, he was Phil Nye, and for the most part, people recognized him and heard of him and knew who he was, more so than we even did the day he walked in the door. Mm-hmm. So I think just having somebody of his stature just added credibility immediately to our news program that nobody could have brought here.
Well, he had an impact on the residents, on the township officials, but he also had an immense impact on those of us that work here now. How has he changed things in this building and personally for you guys?
Well, obviously he taught us so much about how to produce a program with journalistic integrity.
Because we didn't have any at the time.
We didn't know.
I didn't study journalism. And I'll admit that. I said that's why we're going to hire somebody to do it.
He almost became a father figure to you.
Absolutely. I told Phil years and years and years ago that I felt like I developed a relationship with him that maybe I might have missed out of with maybe my own grandfathers, you know, because of the age difference. But oh, absolutely. I had a relationship with Phil that I've never experienced with somebody else, especially to have such a big age gap between us and yet still find these common grounds the way we did. And it was the conversations that I love the most.
What will we miss most with Phil gone now?
Conversations.
And the stories that he's told from his career. Just a great guy with a great personality and a great sense of humor.
A great friend too, right?
Yes.
The best. He would have done anything for you. Anything that you needed, Phil was there for you. He's a good man. And I would like to say that I feel like we here at Shelby TV are blessed, because I think we got Phil at a really awesome time in his life, because we got Phil for the last 12, 13 years of his life where he was very reflective and very open to tell his stories and just very much wanting to share his experiences. And so we got to hear him firsthand, and they were awesome.
And some stories were painful. He would tell us that he neglected his family and regretted not spending enough time with his wife and his daughters. And it was interesting to hear a man sit there and tell you these things, because that's not something you would normally share.
He was very open about it, but in the same years that we were fortunate enough to get to know Phil ourselves, I think that he spent those years with his family, and he made it up to his family in those years, and that was really, really important to him, and I really believe that he did that.
Yeah. And I'd like to think also that he, took away a positive experience from us.
Yeah.
You know, he learned how to use the computer.
Oh yeah, we taught him a lot. We actually taught that old awesome new trip.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think he loved meeting and helping the young people. And I enjoyed having, an intergenerational staff. We have very young people out of high school, and people who are like 80 years old, all working together. And I think it brings a lot to the table, when you have that mix of experience and motivations. And Phil was there to help guide the talent.
John and Stacey, thank you so much. Yeah, you got a little preview there. Phil was one of the greatest storytellers of all time on the radio and on television and in person. Coming up, those who spent more time with him than any. More from Dick Purton and Eric Smith as they reflect on Phil Nye.
financial advisor is being accused of committing one of the largest investment frauds in the history of the United States.
I guess we're not going to Aspen. That's fine. You see, I like tennis balls. He likes insider trading. So he's going to jail and I'm going to a shelter. And no, they're not the same thing. Shelters are for good pets that want to be adopted. Jails are for criminals. I've done nothing. Uh-oh. Ooh, okay, I stole a cheeseburger once. I'm a dog.
Thank you for joining us on this special edition of Shelby This Week. Like you've heard, Phil Nye cut his journalism teeth in radio first, and Detroit legends Dick Burton and Eric Smith have been a huge part of his team. But the career Phil is one person. The friend Phil is another. Our Megan O'Brien sat down with Burton and Smith to learn about Phil outside of the newsroom.
Phil Nye was a perfectionist in the newsroom and was a phenomenal friend. Phil understood that he had an awesome responsibility when he'd pick up a microphone, but also to be a good friend to his peers. A bond started between three greats, Phil Nye, Dick Burton, and Eric Smith. The three men first met at WKNR Radio in 1965. Here's Dick Burton, Detroit radio legend, and Phil's friend.
Really, my most fond memory of Phil involves the fact of Thanksgiving Day, 1965. And so I'd been in town about 6 months, from May to November, whatever that works out to be. And it was Thanksgiving Day. And Phil came to me one day and said, my wife Joanne and I would like to invite you and your family to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. I said, wow, really? As I said, I had Gail, my wife Gail, and my two girls, Jennifer and Jackie, who were, again, about 4 and 2. And Phil, you know, had 5 daughters, Phil and Joanne. So here we all were around the table, and that was my fondest memory of Phil, because that was an awfully nice thing to do, to invite the new guy in town, because we had no relatives here. In fact, we still don't. I guess that's why we had 6 kids, so we could create our own relatives. And I've always remembered so fondly Phil and Joanne, to the extent that when daughter number 4 was born, we were looking for a name. We'd already had, by this time, Jennifer, Jackie, and Jill. I know it sounds a little hokey, but we like the name Jill. So we had Jennifer, Jackie, and Jill. It's time for daughter number 4. Well, what should we name her? And we thought back to that dinner with Joanne Nye and Phil and their family. So we named our daughter Joanne after Joanne Nye. And she now, of course, Joanne is an anchor woman, Joanne Burton on Channel 7. Kind of small world, huh? Yeah. How those little things that can happen in life that really mean so very much, you know, years later. So it was a delight knowing him, and he meant a lot to me personally, because he made a great radio station greater at Keener and did a heck of a job at Channel 7. I mean, during Phil's reign, they were the king of the hill. You know, we got who you wanted, and between him and Jim Osborne, who was the general manager, who was fabulous at Channel 7. So Phil meant a lot to me personally, and especially at Keener, professionally, personally, because of a Thanksgiving dinner way back in 1965.
We sat down with former Channel 7 personality Eric Smith. He describes Phil's character.
Honest, probably to a fault. Dedicated to his family. You know, there are very few true gentlemen, and he always was a gentleman. And I don't care if he was barking at you with the worst language that he could muster, he was still doing it as a gentleman, and really as a favor to you, to make you better. He and Joanne produced 5 beautiful young women. He was so proud of those girls, and he should be. It's difficult. There aren't enough words to define a character. He was a character in many ways. I'll miss being able to pick up the phone and say, hey man, what do you think about this? Whether it was a professional question, perhaps if there's a legacy for Phil with me, it was teaching me the importance of the spoken word and how each word makes a difference in a sentence. Are you sure you want to say it this way? Yeah. No, you're not. You know, because you're leaving something open. You're leaving not a fact out, but you're leaving a question mark. Don't leave a question mark unless you intend to. There are a million lessons, just a million lessons, and you know, he in many ways taught me to write because of his love for the language.
Not only was Phil a great friend, he was a great dresser.
But there was a cheap suit store down in Dearborn called Fifth Avenue Menswear. And they would give us, if you bought one, they'd give you a free suit, see? So Phil and I would go down there. And at the time, I mean, a decent suit cost maybe $75 or something, you know. And so we'd walk out of there with two suits for $75 and think we were pretty sharp. And, you know, shark skin and, and skinny ties and all that. Yeah, but he was a clothes horse. He had he was forever making sure he had everything just right.
Phil Nye was a father figure and a friend, always with a dedication to truth.
Phil Nye has mentored so many young journalists. You've seen Megan O'Brien on this program for years now. With him gone, she will be producing and anchoring Shelby this week permanently. She's in the control room now with Shelby's top stories.
All right, Nick, local stories going on recently around Shelby Township. The Mother-Son Dance was held at Cherry Creek recently. Over 120 mothers and sons came out to the event. Families dressed up for this special occasion, and all were smiles for the dinner and dancing. Sons and moms had a great time hitting the dance floor together. Looks like it was a fun evening for all. In other news, the Clinton River Area Mountain Bike Association, also called CRAMBA, local nonprofit organization, recently donated over $160 to the Shelby Township Parks and Rec Department. Some background information on CRAMBA: numerous volunteers have spent countless hours manually building trails throughout Shelby Township for bikers to enjoy. The local group does all of this for free, all for Shelby Township bikers. The money they donated will go towards the Shelby Township Special Olympics program. Parks and Rec Director Joe Youngblood, CRAMBA Coordinator Steve Vignew, and firefighter volunteer bike patroller Jeremy Verbecki were in attendance for the check presentation. Another excellent story: Shelby Township senior citizens recently stuffed plastic eggs for Easter. This is a yearly tradition for township seniors. They have quite the assembly line going on at the senior center. Over 60 seniors stuffed thousands of eggs with candies and other goodies. The stuffed eggs will be used for the annual Easter egg hunt that goes on Saturday, April 12th. And those are the local stories going on around Shelby Township. Back to our Nick Monticelli in the newsroom.
Megan, thank you. One of the last lessons Phil tried to teach all of us here is maybe his most important one: the balance of family and work. He struggled with it, having 5 daughters, 11 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. He was preceded in death by his wife Joanne and his daughter Pamela. To the Nye family, your loss is far greater than ours, but he did have an impact on us and this community that will never be forgotten. That said, like a retired jersey, Phil's Shelby TV jacket will hang forever in these rafters, reminding us of the lessons he taught. And in the words of our friend and mentor on his deathbed, before falling asleep forever, all good things must come to an end.
So, you're looking for help with your mortgage. Worried about foreclosure? Messy stuff. We're a mortgage rescue company. We can help you keep your house. All we ask for in return is that you submit to our plans for galactic domination. We're not so different, you and I. Sign.
Yeah, this is not what we...
Have you met my henchman, Radu?
Nice to meet you.
Radu.
We'll see you later.
If you're facing foreclosure, make sure you're talking to the right people. Speak with HUD-approved housing counselors free of charge at 888-995-HOPE.